Hey everyone, Donnie with Anderson Ford Motorsport here, and today we have a very special product spotlight for you. Digital dashes are a nice way to modernize your Foxbody Mustang, and usually the big intimidation factor is modifying your wiring. A lot of times it involves splicing, cutting of wires, and it can be very intimidating for someone, especially for the do-it-yourselfer. Now today's product is definitely going to highlight that and make your install of a digital dash much easier. Which brings me to my guest here. He's actually going to explain, introduce himself, and also go over the products here that he's offering and what we're carrying at Anderson Ford Motorsport.
Thank you, Donnie. I'm Darren with Newrad Solutions, and today I'd like to introduce you to my Digital EZ harness. My kit is going to simplify this install, possibly even saving you money from having a dealer install this product for you. One thing I would like to note with my kit, I offer it in two versions. I have a regular version and a short version. This is probably one of the most common questions I get, why I have the short version. Today we're going to be installing a Dakota Digital RTX dash. It has a remote control box, which we will take and wire to this control box. So that is why we have the regular length kit. However, my product also supports other dash manufacturers such as Autometer, the Envision product. It also supports the Holly Pro Dash, Intellitronics, New Vintage, and others. And to clarify what I mean by that, this is an Autometer dash. So the Autometer provides the head unit, but they already provide the wiring for you. So instead of having to supply all the extra wire, what I do is I solve the problem for you. So what my kit does is it attaches directly to your OEM connectors. No need to splicing. It saves you time and aggravation. Follow the simple to use wiring diagram. Saves you a couple hours of time, and also having to modify a harness that actually is not even available on the market today.
Correct, and that makes it completely reversible. If you got like a rare car, you want to put a dash in there, and say you go to sell the car at some point, and you don't want to, they don't want the digital dash, they want the original equipment, you can simply reverse it and not have to worry about exposed wire or anything along those lines.
Correct, and you don't have to worry, because mine snaps on directly, you don't have to worry about a improper connection or a loose connection. Frankly, there is no connection other than directly to the OEM connector.
Like Darren mentioned, we're going to be installing the Dakota Digital RTX. I chose this one personally for my 87 Mustang behind us here because I wanted all the upgraded features that it offers, plus keep that nice retro look of a Foxbody Mustang. We do offer this as a bundled price unit together, but we also offer many other products for digital dashes on the website.
So something else to be aware of when you upgrade to a digital dash, this is one of those upgrades, besides all the great features it has, it's something you interact with in the entire time you're riding in your car. So, you know, having put these in my own personal vehicle, I can tell you that once you put a digital dash in your car, you're probably never going to go back. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Now in Donnie's car, because he's got a remote mounted battery in his trunk, he actually has to have a disconnect, so that's here. For most of you guys, this is just going to be take the negative terminal off your battery. First thing I want to point out, we've already removed the driver's side seat, and that is basically for ease of filming and access to the car. It's not a requirement to actually remove the seat, but it can aid in your installation. The center console is required to be removed, and I'm going to demonstrate that for you here. You can see this is an RTX control box, and it's actually a little bit thinner than the VHX control box. So if you try to stuff this behind the dash with the wires that are sticking out of the terminals, not really optimal. So I do recommend removing the center console. So we're not going to show that here because there's many videos out there on the web to do it. It's very easy, just a handful of screws. So we're removing the plastic around the steering column. So as you can see, there's 3 screws. Just be aware, some cars only require 2. So okay guys, on top of the cluster there are 2 Phillips screws. It generally helps to have a 90-degree little ratchet wrench, or you're going to need a stubby screwdriver. Okay, our next step is going to be to remove the actual stock gauge cluster, and you will see there are 4 torque screws, 1 on each corner. Okay, so guys, this can sometimes be either very easy or the tricky part. Nothing's complicated. However, as you can see in some vehicles, the wires can be very short, and the key is getting the cluster connectors out of the back of the dash and removing the speedo cable. Okay, so guys, there's 2 connectors. You're going to squeeze and remove these. Now, on Donnie's car, it's actually pretty easy. Not going to lie, sometimes These connectors can be the wires coming out of these can be quite short. So just, squeeze and pull straight back, try not to pull at an angle. So now I'm going to remove from the left side, or the driver's side. Now a little tip I want to show you. It's very common for people to struggle getting the speedo cable out. The trick on the speedo cable, instead of trying to squeeze and pull, is actually to push in, release, and then pull. So guys, something I want to point out. So Donnie is pretty fortunate. This one actually has a fair amount of wire on the driver's side, the gray connector. And this is actually pretty common. This is actually a little bit longer than I often see when I do these cars, but it's still, you can see it's fairly short. And this is one of the advantages of the install kit, is we're going to show you how to connect these, but you're not going to have to fight with any wiring behind these connectors. So not only are you not going to be hacking up a clean dash, but you're also not going to have to struggle dealing with wires that don't really have a lot of length. So guys, just something I want to point out, I don't think many people talk about this, but it'll help you in two ways so you see the position. So this is, as facing me, this is the driver's side connector, this is the passenger side connector. As I mentioned with the speedometer, the trick, once you know it, it becomes very easy. Push the speedometer cable in, squeeze the plastic, and pull out. But another little thing that is very important and is not to be missed is on the back side of your gauge cluster is a 510 ohm resistor, as it came from Ford. In a digital install, this resistor, if you remove it and you do not replace it, if you get lucky, your car will start and then die, and in many cases your vehicle won't start. Now I'm going to go over one of the nice things about my kit. We're going to do almost all the wiring outside the car. But in the case of Dakota Digital and others, this resistor, what they refer to as a load harness, it's essentially replacing this resistor, but it's very important. You cannot skip this step. And just to put another little thing that you may have as an issue with your vehicle, and this is just more of a, hey, what is that? If you're not aware, this is what they call the anti-slosh module that is on the back of your dash. This is actually, over the years, can be a fail point for your regular dash. In fact, a lot of guys, sometimes they think they need their whole cluster. So if you are upgrading to the dash, or if you have an issue with your fuel sender and you've replaced the fuel sender and it still doesn't work, it's another reason to go to a digital dash, because by default you're essentially not having to deal with this anti-slosh module. All right guys, so next thing I want to cover, and this is probably the most asked question I get when it comes to a digital dash, and that is, what do you do with the odometer? So you really have two options. You can decide, in this case, Donnie's car has been rolled over, has 115,000 miles. So we could either set his dash to 115,000 miles to replicate what the actual vehicle is, or in many cases, people maybe have a brand new build and they want to start from zero, so you can do either. So we will go through this in the setup, but I just want to cover this topic because it is a frequently asked question about what do you do with the odometer. The only thing to be aware of is after 100 miles on the digital dash is locked. So you have 100 miles to decide what you want to do. After 100 miles, if you wanted to fix it or change your mind, you would have to return it to the manufacturer to reset it. Okay guys, I'm going to show you how to prep your dash and the wiring. My kit can support both the 87 to 89 and the 90 to 93. So again, check the wiring diagram on the website. In this case, Donnie has a 87 GT on an 87 to 89. We're going to cut in this load resistor to pins 5 and 6 on what is the left connector. For you guys with a 90 to 93, you are going to be using pins 2 and 14 on the right connector. It's the same process on either side. So now we're going to go ahead and lay this out. And again, we want pins 5 and 6. And if we were not doing this with my kit, you would be doing this inside your car and you would be cutting into your stock harness. So what makes this very nice is the ends of my wires are labeled. However, I also have nice, easy to read call outs in these molded pieces, so it's very easy to read them. Just double check so you don't make a mistake. You don't want to go all the way to the ends of these wires You definitely want to cut these. Don't just try and cut this in at the tail end of the wire. It may or may not create an issue, but this little bit of extra resistance, these resistors on the back of the cluster, they do set up the voltage across your alternator, so you don't want to run into any charging issue. So what I do is I take pins 5 and 6, I just eyeball it about 4 or 5 inches, because we're going to be putting braided loam on this, and then we're actually going to have heat shrink. So you want to be well within that braided loam. So I come about 5 inches back, and then I snip the first wire. And because we don't want 2 butt connectors side by side, about the width of 1 butt connector, I do the second one. So this is pins 5 and 6. This is actually automotive grade wire. This is not your AutoZone stuff. So I do recommend keeping this. It's nice TXL wire and can be used possibly for any of the other expansion modules, especially in a Dakota system. So this is 22 gauge wire, and you want about 3/8 of an inch. So I just like to clean up the end a little bit on the ends of this load harness. Now this is just a resistor. It doesn't matter which end. Now we're gonna go ahead and strip. This is 18 gauge wire. As you can see, I'm just using basic set of strippers, nothing fancy here. And I will point out, because there are certain people who are willing to die on this hill. If you want to solder this in, that's okay. Whatever option you use. And I'm just using a simple set of crimpers in this case. Because this is an insulated crimper, you want to make sure that you use the proper location to crimp this. So whenever you're crimping, do a quick pull test. That's all you really need to do. So there's one side, nice pull test, make sure it's not going to come out. Okay, now we do the last one. Good solid crimp with a pull test, nice and solid. Now you can see with the butt connectors staggered, we're going to end up putting this in the braided loam. Now we're going to come in with the heat gun. So now we've cut our shrink tubing. So what you want to do is slide on the appropriate size. Next, we're going to take our braided loam. There are 2 slightly different sizes. It's pretty obvious which one goes on which. Braided loam is on, and we're going to place our shrink tubing. So I would like to point out, where to terminate your braided loam, leave yourself just a little bit of flexibility. Okay. You see that there's some extra length of the braided loam, and you see the labels on the wires. You don't want to come in here and just put your shrink tubing right on the end and call it a day. What I'm going to do for you, I'm going to wire this actually and simulate the entire wiring outside of the car so you can visually see how it all connects together. And that way when we put it in the car, it's not quite as visual, because when it's in the car, it's behind the dash. So I'm going to actually go through the individual wire, step by step. But one of the things I like to do, and this can be personal preference, but what I like to do is I like to peel this back enough and make sure that you have enough room to run and navigate. And once you know where that is, then come in with the shrink tubing. And once you know that you have enough wires, you don't need to really cut these super short. You can leave enough length so for any kind of future projects, or if you're working on another project and you need to move this around. So I will come in here, I'm going to strip the ends off of all the wires. I'm going to show you how this connects up. And the other thing I want to point out, this is probably a good a time as any to bring this up. I highly recommend, and this is really almost for any gauge cluster that you decide to go with, I highly recommend using the GPS for a couple reasons. One is it actually eliminates a wire. You don't have to splice into your VSS signal. I'm going to show you when we're in the car where you can make that connection. Maybe at this point you want to buy the dash, or if somebody wants to add this later. But it does eliminate an extra connection you have to do into that wire. But more importantly about the GPS, what's nice about this is in the Ford model, your speed sensor, you have to change the end gear. When you're using a GPS unit, you no longer have to worry about your speedometer being correlated to the gear onto the end of your car. So as many of us do, we may go to the track with different size tires, and you're running, you want an accurate speedometer. You won't need to do that with the GPS. It doesn't care what the tire size is. As I mentioned previously, this kit works both for the 87 to 89 and 90 to 93. Because of that universal fit, there will be on both versions, there will be a couple wires that are not used. Provided in the kit, and you can cut to fit, is shrink tubing to place over the ends of this. We'll be using a heat gun on the unused terminals. Okay, so now we're ready to prepare the wires. If you follow the wiring diagram and the fact that I have a universal kit on the 87 to 89, on the left connector, you will have 3 pins that will not be used because these are going to be used on a 90 to 93. So pins L2, or basically left 2, so pins 2, 4, and 9 will not be used. There's no need to strip the ends. In the kit, I provide 3/32 heat shrink tubing that allows you to just cap the ends of these off. You don't want to have any kind of event with a stray wire contacting any metal. So we're just going to go ahead and place on the shrink tubing. You cut it to fit, and we seal off the ends. So on the right connector, R2 will be the one that is actually capped off. We will be using pins 10 and 11 on the right connector. So now we're going to go ahead underneath the car on a lift or jack stands. You're going to want to pull the cotter pin and remove the speedometer cable. We will not be reusing the speedometer cable. Insert the cotter pin into the end of the VSS or the speed sensor, and provided with the Dakota Digital kit is a plug that replaces the speedometer cable. Now, one little tip here, make sure you put this in. It doesn't go in and then push this in, it won't work. So you're gonna wanna push this in, and sometimes it can actually be kind of ornery and you need to push really hard. So now we're gonna replace the speed sensor back into the transmission. We're going to replace the VSS cable onto the end, and with that, we're done underneath the car. And now we will remove the speedometer cable from the dash through the firewall, keeping the grommet, and now we will be removing the speedometer cable from the vehicle. So the next thing we're going to prepare is our ground wire. I just want to make sure that this is very clear. There is on one of these, on the actual stock connectors from the dash, there is a ground. However, following the instructions from Dakota Digital and as best practice, instead of reusing that ground, it is per the manual that you actually run a separate chassis ground. I provide a heat shrinked ring terminal. What I prefer to do is strip the end that is not with the ground label, because you want that closer to your terminal box. Now we will crimp the ring terminal onto the ground wire. And as always, we do a pull test with using the quick start guide as provided by Dakota Digital. I'm gonna do everything outside the car, so you're gonna have a nice tutorial. We have 2 sender wires. This went to our oil pressure and our water temperature. So these are coded. So we're gonna have our 2 wire, which is our temperature sender, and it's labeled here. It's basically ground and the signal wire. We're gonna go ahead, place these in here on the side of the box. Next, we're gonna do our oil pressure sender. Now there's a difference between, for those that are doing a VHX, if you're happen to watch this video, when you're doing the VHX, the shielded cable, make sure you don't cut this off, would tie to ground. But in this case, they actually provide separate inputs. So we're just gonna follow the coding here. So now we have the bare wire, the ground wire goes to the black minus sign, the white goes to the white, and the red goes to the red. Next, provided in the kit is a switch. Allows you to switch between the setup and the functioning of the dash. It's about as easy as it gets. Called switch input. Next, ground wire. And the other end of the ground wire is a provided self-tapping screw. We're gonna drill a small hole and use the self-tapper to go in. Basically, you just want to clean ground. As I mentioned previously, you must use a chassis ground per the instructions. Don't use the ground input that goes through the connectors. Next, because we're using the GPS box, this makes it very simple for the GPS. You're going to use the BIM IO connector. Now, in this BIM cable, you don't have to worry about the speed and ground. Those are already provided in this cable, so you don't need to worry about the grounding. The only thing is the power. We will jump, and I'm going to show that to you next. But in this case, all we need to do is we're going to have a wire that goes from the battery that will go to the same 12 volt DC constant here. And that point, that's all you need for your GPS sender. So the other end of the BIM cable goes directly into the BIM IO port. And then the other component, when you buy this optional GPS box, there's an option for the GPS antenna, and it's just simply a connector that goes into the BIM box. This allows you to remote mount an antenna, which we are going to show you. So we have our constant power wire. So now we have one of the connections says GPS battery and power. as well as the constant power. So we're going to strip the end of him off. And both of these are going to connect into the same connection for the 12 volt DC constant. So all provided in the kit. You don't need to really think about it. Just follow what I'm doing here and you'll be good. So one of the last pieces on this is a buzzer. This is only provided not on the VHX series, but definitely on the RTX series. They provide a buzzer for some reason. If you decide that you want to program in an alarm, say low oil pressure, high water temp, or high RPM, you can make this buzzer go off. You don't need to use it, and it's very simple to plug in. There's a little connector on the back side of the dash. That's all that requires. You plug this into the back of the display, and then you follow right to the display cable on the box. Okay, so guys, what I recommend you do, get the wiring diagram, probably maybe even like here, just pull it up on your phone, but it's right on the website. And now you're gonna see why we wait till the end to cut the proper length for the braided loam and the final termination. And that's because different wires go to different lengths. So we basically give ourselves enough working room, plus to move around, and then once we figure out where everything's gonna go, we'll cut it and do the final piece of shrink tubing. I'm going to go through the wiring diagram in order for Donnie's 87. So the first thing we're gonna do is pin 1, or in this case it's the left connector. And if you're not sure, that is a left connector on an 87 to 89 and 90 to 93. The only difference is gonna be the wires that you use. So we're gonna take L1, and L1 is our left turn signal. Next is going to be pin 7, which is the brake, or L7. So next is going to be our check engine signal, which is L8 or pin 8, and that will go to the engine input. And next will be pin 11 or L11, which will go to the tach input. Next will be pin 13 or L13, which will go to our right turn signal. And lastly, on the left connector, L14, or 1 pin left, L14, and this will go to your high beam. Next, moving on to the right connector on an 87 to 93, which looks just like this. There's only 3 connections. Pin 10, or in the case of our harness, labeled R10, will be your fuel sending. So the fuel signal will go to the signal, not the ground. What I will tell you is if you read the instructions, or if you have problems, just things that I have run in from doing these installs, more often than not, if you have an issue on a Foxbody Mustang, my personal experience has been that when there's an issue, it's generally the sender. So next is gonna be R11 or pin 11, and this will go to your ignition. In this case, just to be precise, the red plus of ignition power. And lastly is R14 or pin 14 of the right connector, which will go to the dimmer. Now as I'm doing this, I'm gonna explain to you how the dimmer works on Dakota systems. This actually powers the dimmer because the dimmer will get powered when you turn your headlights on. But this actually will not work. You really lose your functionality of your dimmer. There is an accessory kit that you will need if you want to maintain dimming. What it does allow you to do is set the level of the brightness at night. However, there are additional settings for those who want those lights on in the day. You can actually make a day mode and a night mode. Those are the things that I'm not going to cover here because you know, it's really reading through the instructions and it starts getting into depends on what you want. Just be aware that the dimmer function doesn't really work without that accessory box. You plug it into here and it controls the dimming through here. And with that, this is all the things that you're going to need to wire. The only thing we'll have left to show you is the speed or VSS wire, which we'll show you inside the car. And then I'm also going to show you how to tap into your fuse box. All of this, as you've just watched me do, is right on a bench top or right at your kitchen table. And I can assure you that when you are inside this car, if you don't have my kit, if you are having to sit there and tap into those wires and splice into them, tracing the colors, oftentimes hard to read, especially because they faded over the years. Is it red? Is it orange? This saves you a couple hours of time and frustration, and it's just more comfortable doing it sitting here. Now, the last thing that we need to do prior to getting this ready, now that we have this, and this is really going to be based on where you're mounting the box, you want to have enough wire left over. So I'll just show you how I do it, and it's really going to be dependent on where you do the install. I like to have enough wire so that I can move the box around, it's not restricted. And once you've figured out where that happy space is, we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut the loam. So now that we've cut this to the proper length, when we put it in the car, obviously I'm going to have to disconnect these here, showing you what I'm doing. But by laying this out, you don't necessarily need to connect these. I'm doing this for demonstration purposes. But when you are inside the car, you're basically, once you have this, when you know where it's at, you can lay this out on the bench top, figure out where it's at, and terminate these prior to going into the car. The only thing I recommend, just again, because it's easier doing it at the bench top, is strip all the wires and terminate the wire ends that we didn't use for the 90 to 93 in this case. Just go ahead and do all this outside the car. We're going to go ahead and disconnect this now, and I'm going to go ahead and put on the shrink tubing. And now we're going to remove the wire and remove the water temperature sender, which is in the driver front side of the lower intake. So now you remove the OEM oil pressure sensor, and we're going to replace it with the Dakota Digital sensor. Now, Dakota provides a generic hardware. It's universal. It's used in these senders get used in multiple vehicles. A couple things to note: you must use the supplied senders in terms of wiring. One is a 3-terminal, and the other one is a 2-terminal, so they physically would not fit. You can't mix those up. And then the next thing you need to do is you need to determine which brass hardware pieces to replace when you're screwing these back in. These are brass. Do not over torque these. There's many guys who get heartbreak when they decide to over torque these, and these will snap right off. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and snap on our sender for the oil. So all we did for the temperature sender and the oil pressure sensor, we just used a piece of fish tape, put it back through the same hole that we removed from the speedometer cable, pulled it back through the dash, and now we got plenty of length. As for your GPS antenna, really you got multiple options. A lot of these, there's enough space to just take this little antenna wire and drop it right through. If you don't want that and you want direct, you could actually drill a small 3/8 hole in here. You're going to push this and just have it go straight down. Something to know. So this is a remote antenna. Now in the instructions, it basically says do not put on glass. However, instead of wanting to run all the way through different pieces of the interior, you can mount this, and they say, you know, it will work. It's just not the ideal location. And I think where a lot of people will do this is you can mount this over in the corner on the windshield. You pull the 3M tape off, or 2 pieces of Velcro. The smaller piece is intended as your mounting option for the GPS box. You can mount this up underneath behind the dash against the HVAC box. Your other option, in this case Donnie has preferred to put it on the fan casing. You do want to get something like Windex or Sprayway. You want this nice and clean. Now there's really 2 ways to mount this depending on if you're going to have it exposed. One is you want the lettering up on the top. Just be aware when that wire comes down, it's going to come down into the bottom of the box. If that is really important, you want it to look slick, you will have to deal with the fact that the lettering of the box would be upside down. Okay guys, we don't need to do this for Donnie's car because we're using the GPS BIM box from Dakota. But I do want to show you if for some reason you elect not to use the GPS, and there's an 8-pin connector that has, what you're looking for is you're looking for a dark green with white. So there's the male and the female side. Now on the 87 to 89, it's the same color on both ends. It changes colors on the 90 to 93. So you're looking for, and if you really weren't certain, you could actually go all the way down to your speed sensor and look at the wires that come out the other end. So it's actually pretty easy to trace it out. But in this case, it is 87 and 89. So we basically can tap into any one of these. If we were needing to tap into this, provided in the kit is a terminal kit that would snap directly onto a wire, and I'm just going to demonstrate this for you. This is properly sized for 18 gauge wire. So some people think they don't like these, but more often than not the problem is because they use these on the inappropriately sized wire. So all you need to do, wrap this around the wire, line up the slot inside the wire, and take a pair of pliers, and it'll just snap together. And that'll give you a nice, good connection. And at that point, you're going to take the other end of the supplied wire that's in the kit, and you're going to use this connector, crimp connection, and then you would slide it onto here, and you would run your wire over to the control box. So just for completeness, I want to show, because this is part of the kit and the wire is also provided, that would go over to your speed signal. Again, I am going to repeat this, that I do recommend getting the GPS box, because not only are you not it eliminates not having to alter a wire, but also you don't want any added load or anything connected off your speed signal if you can avoid it. And with that, next thing we're going to do is we're going to do our ground. So we have a ring terminal that's already on, as we had already done. We're going to take and find a location. Pretty much there's all kinds of exposed metal underneath the dash, so just find a good spot, drill a small hole, take a little drill, and we're going to just use this screw with the ring terminal. Okay, so we're going to need a 12-volt constant source, guys, and in a Foxbody 87 and 93, the best one is going to be what is labeled circuit 16, which is going to be a 20 amp fuse, and then it is going to be, basically it's going to say it's for your horn, and the way it's labeled by Ford is a cigar lighter. When we do this fuse tap, what is important, we want to be able to tap into the side that is hot, or in this case 12 volts. So you can either get a test light, you can copy what I'm doing, but again, that doesn't guarantee anything. Take a pair of needle nose, pull out the fuse, take a test light or a multimeter, put one side to ground, and find 12 volts. You want to see if it's on the left and the right side, because that's the side that the fuse tap is going to go on. In this case, it is going to be the right blade. So when we install this little bladed fuse tap, clip on just like that. Again, on this car, and they should be the same, but if you want to verify, but if you want to take a chance, worst case, you just have to flip it. It's going to be the right blade. You're going to insert this into the fuse panel. We put the blade on the right side, and as we made back on the bench, we have the bladed connector. We're just going to push the bladed connector. Now in this case, Donnie's fuse panel is a little bit loose. But again, this is why we have the battery disconnected. So once you place this in, you will need to bend this down, because we're going to be replacing the fuse panel. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and take the display cable. There's plenty of length, because we're going to go right behind where the stereo would go. Okay guys, a little tip here. You see this AC vent with the left connector. So a little trick, if you will, is to go ahead and push this connector back behind the plastic. And I can't emphasize enough how much benefit this is to being able to plug and play. If you didn't have this kit, you would have to match up all of these wires and pins, connect these, and you can see it's not very fun working behind the dash. Huge time saver. I'm going to go ahead and snap it in. And now we're going to run the wires behind the dash. Put your hand up there. There's a huge hole back in behind here. It just slides right through. Bringing the new Dakota cluster up into the car. At this point, there's just two connectors. There's the displayed connector and the buzzer connector. And now using the hardware, the actual install of the cluster bezel is basically just the opposite. It's the inverse of the removal step. Very quick and easy. I'm going to show you how to set up your odometer and your fuel sender. Okay, so with the switch, we're going to depress the switch to the left, which is setup or switch 1. With that depressed, we're now going to turn the key to the on position, and we're going to enter the setup mode. We're going to let go of switch 1. Pretty much at this point, you're going to use switch 1 to select and toggle through the menus. We're going to keep toggling until we get to fuel. Now, in the case of a 87 and 93 Foxbody, now we're on fuel. So now we're going to depress and hold switch 1, release. Now that we're in the fuel menu, we're going to choose the input, and again depress the left side of the switch, switch 1, and hold. And now we need to select the appropriate sender resistance range. So you can see here we've actually it's already set for forward 20 to 150. So it's not exact on the 22 to 143. So this is a close one you're going to be able to get. And since we're here and I'm showing you this, the forward 73 to 10 is going to be for your 79 to 86 vehicles. We're going to select our odometer setting, choose the set odometer or set odom menu. We're going to again depress switch 1 and hold. As in the case of Donnie's car, we're going to match the existing car's mileage, which is 115,000 miles, or 115,006 miles. So now we're going to start toggling through the digits, and then every time we've toggled up by selecting switch 2. When we're ready to go to the next one, we're going to hit switch 1, and so on and so forth. So and now we have set the odometer. And it's going to ask yes or no. Do you want that? We're going to toggle yes. Press switch 1 and hold. And now we have set up our fuel, and we have set up our odometer. Next, because we're using the GPS BIM module, we need to set up our speedometer. Now we're going to select speed, press switch 1 and hold. And now we need to decide which input is going to be the input to our speedometer. And in this case, we're going to hit switch 1 and hold for input. And here you have an option of signal or pull up. So now we have a signal. We're going to press switch 1 and hold. And now we have to choose whether it's the sensor or the BIM. In this case, we are using a BIM module. We are actually using so we're going to go ahead and hit, for the BIM, we're going to hit switch 1 and hold. And then release. So the next menu we want to set up is the service menu. So again, switch 1 and hold. And this is going to be for your service reminder, whatever it may be. In this case, Donnie is asked and requested to do 3,000 mile intervals, so we're going to select that. Press switch 1 and hold. And now we're going to go set up our GPS box.
That looks great. That looks great. I absolutely love this. Alright, that's going to wrap up the installation of the Dakota Digital Dash using the Newrad Solutions EZ harness install kit. So, just right off the cuff, if you don't have one of those install kits, just be prepared for long hours of just crimping, splicing, a bunch of wire work. This just made it so much easier. So I'm super happy with the Dash. The layout and everything looks awesome. I love the features of it, and I can't thank Darren enough for making the trip to actually help us with the installation and checking out his new product. So if you like our content, please like, share, and subscribe. Be sure to hit the notification bell. That way you don't miss out on any new content coming to the channel. And also, please subscribe if you haven't already. Take care. We'll see you in the next video. All right, Darren, we got it all done into the waning hours of the night, but we did get the installation complete. As you guys saw, the dash looks great in the car. I'm super happy with it, and of course having Darren's product just made the installation so much better, so much smoother. I can only imagine if you didn't have the product, how much more intense the wiring job would have been, especially trying to do it inside the car. I think you displayed beautifully exactly why you would want this product in your car. So we did run into a couple of hiccups, so full disclosure, we're not going to hide anything from you guys, but it was actually my car's fault, part of my fault I guess you can say. But we did run into a couple of hiccups here and there, but again, that'll come with any installation on a 30-plus-year-old car. So I'm super happy with the way it turned out. And Darren, if you just want to talk about the installation, what you thought of it and everything, I'm super happy with the way it turned out. But in your product just made a world of difference.
Yeah, having done a bunch of these, Donnie, I found that pretty much it went smooth. The only things that we did run into is he has a bad dimmer switch.
Yep.
So it can be intermittent. So when you turn on the headlights and expecting the backlight to come on, if you jiggle the dimmer switch, sometimes the backlight will go off. So he's just going to order up a new dimmer switch. That'll get solved. And then the other little hiccup, he has aftermarket fuel rails. And as a result, as you know, when we went through this, when we went to install the temperature sender, one little hiccup we ran into is the very top of it. There was a little bit of interference with the fuel rail. So it really only needed about a 30-second to move.
Not much.
All we did, we just it literally clicked right in. You could hear it. It clicked. We let it go, and it is perfectly fine. So those are the only really two little hiccups we ran into. Otherwise, the dash works great. I haven't done, this is for me, great. It's my first RTX install. There are features on here that are quite amazing, the little warning lights and things that are in here. Guys, if you haven't done a digital dash install, you really should consider one. It really does, the performance of the dash and the things that it can show to you, as well as just a neat look when the needles all switch over and the multiple color options. It is a really neat upgrade, and I would strongly consider it.
Yeah, and also just to reiterate the point, he's done this several times in his first RTX. We confirmed that his product also works great with the RTX. Pretty much any line of digital dash, his product will work for you. So I think that's pretty much it. We're going to wrap it up for this evening. A little bit longer than expected, but hey, we learned a couple things about, one I learned personally about my car. We also learned about your product and everything. You don't need to look at the time, that's okay. So
12:51 a.m. guys.
I'd like to thank Darren, of course, for joining us out here today. He made the trip all the way from out east to join us here in our little town of Clinton, Illinois. Also, I'd like to thank our technician Matt for sticking around and giving us a hand on a bunch of things. But that's pretty much going to wrap up this video. If you're interested in one of these awesome RTX digital dashes, plus the Newrad Solutions adapter kit and easy installation harness, we sell those both as a package deal on Anderson Ford Motorsport. We also sell it as an a la carte option if you just need to, if you already have a dash and you just want to get the easy installation harness. We do stock these, and we're super happy to be doing so. Darren, thanks again so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to meet you in person, and also you have a wonderful product. So that's going to pretty much do it for here. We're going to call it a night. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.